Hello, and welcome to Rule of Carnage. My name is Glenn Ford, and I'm a games developer and designer, and I'm here having a conversation with this chap, Mike Hutchinson.
Hello, I'm Mike Hutchinson. I am a games designer and have designed games such as Gaslands and A Million Suns, both available from Offspray War Games. And this is our podcast where we talk about designing better miniature games. We've discussed a range of topics on this podcast so far. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to have a little conversation about something I've chosen to call the victory imperative. So what brought this to mind is I was having a bit of a conversation on a Board Game Geek forum where somebody pointed out that if I'm only playing to win, then I'm not really enjoying the game. If I'm playing the game just to win it, then that's a sign that the game is basically terrible. I'm completely disengaged with the game itself, and I've chosen to just switch off and treat it like this puzzle. But and I think that's very, and I thought about it when the person said it, and although I'm quite a competitive player, that is true for the way I approach games. That you want to be playing the game also while shooting and winning, but at the same time, the dichotomy there is that if I'm not playing to win, if you've played a game with somebody who is not in any way playing to win, they're just mucking about and trying to achieve their own sort of personal goals, and because winning is the way that you engage with the other person around the tabletop. If the other person isn't trying to win via the sort of the processes of the game, that also completely kills the game dead. And so there's this thing about winning, how it makes the game work, when if it's all the game is about, the game isn't working anymore. Win conditions. And I think several times we've had these conversations where I've said about a game that winning should be fun. Trying to win should be the thing that is fun. And when a game says, okay, play the game, have fun, and also here are some victory conditions, I often feel that it's sort of tapped out on some of the fundamentals of game design there. So I thought
is the topic that you want to talk about, like from the perspective of designing better miniature games, like what's the right balance to strike between serving the need for people to win and whatever this other mystical part of the other end of the spectrum is, which is just like enjoying the experience of operating the game in isolation of the victories conditions.
I suppose if we're gonna sort of pin it down into some specific questions for the conversation, can you design a miniatures game that assumes that players are not going to play to win? Can you design a miniatures game that doesn't have victory conditions? What does that do to, what does either of those ideas or assumptions do to designing a miniatures game? And why do we need win conditions? What are they? How do they drive a game and drive its design? What do they bring to the design of a game? Why do we need victory conditions? Given that, and I think it is true, and I think, and I sort of bring this up because it was sort of a quite insightful thing this guy said. We said, obviously you have to play aiming at winning, but once you're playing just to win, that's a sign that that the game is bad, that I've disengaged with the game. I really don't care anymore. All I've got left is going through the process of playing to win. And that's a really bad state to be in, and it's an unfortunate state to be in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess one of the things that I definitely have identified in my own process is that I will work on I'll work on the mechanisms by which you do the things, whether that's moving or shooting or, whatever the mechanical parts of the system, like early in the design, and often up until like the midpoint of the design almost, like I don't even think about victory conditions because I know they're going to come as a result of if the aesthetic experience of handling the system is enjoyable, then you can move. I know I can move on to the victory conditions. Whereas if operating the levers of the system is not fun or interesting, or it's not intuitive, or it's fighting with itself, then like figuring out what the sort of direction that you want to point the players in for some reason doesn't appear to me to be interesting, which is kind of interesting now that I pull it out that way, because it's always seemed very obvious to me that I want to attack it in that way. But in some regards, it could be like, I don't see why you couldn't do a design process in the other direction, where you said, well, how do you win? What's the end state condition that I'm trying to force, and then find the funnest ways of unpacking that end state, that victory condition, sequentially across a number of turns.
Yeah, I
I've
think
just never approached it that way, because it's, for me, it's like models and tape measures and dice are the fun part, and the victory condition is what gives it purpose, but not what I derive the most joy from.
See, I think this is, I mean, this might be just be, a matter of the slightly odd way that I approach games. I don't know, maybe this is a quite standard way of approaching games as a gamer, but before I play the game and I'm reading the rules and I'm figuring it out, I'm trying to figure out how to play the game in order to win, purely in order to win. And my base assumption as a gamer is that what I have to do in order to win will be fun. Because my assumption is the designer has gone, okay, the only thing that I know my game is going to do is they're going to try and win. Because that's the agreed process of playing a game. They'll try and win, and so the thing that I have to make as much fun as I can is the path to winning. And so I studied the game where I learn the rules, whatever, thinking, okay, how do I win this? And I assume that fun will come with my trying to do that. I assume that we packaged in. And I sit down and play the game, and usually, sort of get distracted by the people and the process and just the fun of it. And hopefully the game sort of becomes something else. And it's when, as I say, it's when halfway through the game you go, all right, there is nothing here for me other than trying to just churn out the win. That process is sort of eating its own tail to a degree.
A couple of observations. So one is, as you narrate that, it occurs to me that when I read a board game rule book, lots of board game rule books, I think, correctly put the win condition right at the first almost paragraph, and like that for me is right. Like, if I don't know what I'm doing, I don't care about any of the other rules in this board game rule book. And so, like, always put that victory condition first, because it frames every other rule. And what's weird is that by default, at least most of the war game systems that I have read, they tend to offer the system first, and then the victory conditions are a set of bolt-on scenarios, because it emerges from that simulationist mindset where it's like, well, if I provide even an emulator, not a simulator but an emulator for like a feeling, then it's the expectation is that is a beautiful object in and of itself, and then we'll bolt on victory conditions in a modular fashion to provide multiple games, which is like totally antithetical to board game design.
I mean, I don't know. I wonder, because I wonder whether a certain amount of that is to do with the fact that a lot of tabletop miniature skirmish games, the assumption is that the basic goal is going to be kicking the other person's head off. And then sometimes you get a scenario that says, okay, by the way, whilst you're in the inevitable process of trying to kick the other guy's head off, why not you pick up?
Why not tie your shoes?
Because technically the sweeties are what you're there for in this particular story. I know it's hard for you to wrap your head around, but you're not there to just decapitate all of your friends' guys. You're there to sort of make money while you're doing it, or whatever it happens to be. Whereas I think particularly with board games, a lot of the time, because they are so much more varied, you sit down, you need that victory condition explained up front, because otherwise you're just like flailing for the first few turns. I think it's what makes race games. I think it's in Gaslands, of course, one of the main scenarios being the race game. It's an immediate sort of, okay, what the victory conditions here? It's a race. You already know.
Right.
It's why race games are so popular, I think, in board game design, or used to be sort of in earlier board game design, is because I don't need to explain to you the victory conditions once I tell you it's a race. You've got a whole system set out there. And I think it's I mean, in relation to this, I think it's interesting about Gasland, in some conversations we were having just recently, is that there have been stages in the design of Gaslands where one or two things have popped up and it's just been punishing people for trying to win the game. Like early on, there was a lot of concerns about handicapping and helping out the loser and making it so that someone didn't get too far ahead. And there
Right.
were early sort of design principles that were basically, oh, you're trying to win, slap. You're trying to essentially engage with the game, slap. That'll teach you for doing that, you fool.
That's what happens when you allow a person who never wins war games to design a war game. They make it really difficult for the winning player. But I think, and then the other element, I guess, is that like that path. I really like the idea that, and I think this is where you're catching on. Is like the path to winning must be lined with fun, and so if I hide fun off in a silly direction that's pointed in the direction of not winning, that's sort of wasted design space, right? So like I'm designing for somebody that I'm sort of designing a side quest, whereas if it's like grueling and grinding to like smash out the victory, then that's potentially a weaker design, because you're not saying, well, if you play the game in the spirit of attempting to win, then all of the best parts of the game, or the most satisfying interactions, or like the places with interesting decisions, those should all be on the yellow brick road to victory. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think you're, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as a designer, and so I mean, yeah, in relation, I guess, to the process of designing miniatures games and being better at designing miniatures games, would you? I mean, is it fair to say that the assumption is that your players are going to look at the victory conditions and try and achieve the victory conditions, and that they're a way of mapping the sort of the human behavior that's going to be emergent from somebody encountering your game? Because ultimately, one of the things about skirmish tabletop games is they're very free flowing. They're very sandboxy to a degree. You've got a lot of models that could do a whole bunch of stuff. You could, if you wanted, spend an hour just running your minis round and round the table and playing hide and seek through jungles. It has, you give people all of the elements to do all manner of random bizarre things. And the only way I think, or I find, that you can sort of get some sort of hook into designing it is to go, okay, this is where you as a player are going to try and go. So I know roughly the sort of path you're going to go down. Now it's my job to drop things along that path for you.
I think,
because otherwise,
I think, like, going back to the idea that, like, you don't, when you play a miniatures game, you don't always know the victory conditions straight up front. It's like, so Sean Sutter has that like Nintendo cartridge idea where it's like, once you have some miniatures, they become your entertainment system, and like by buying a new indie rule set, you like plug a new cartridge in and you can use your miniatures in a new way. And I think, interestingly, by default, war games are basically that same system, which is here's the engine, and then we will assume that you can plug in different game modes, because it's very natural to sort of discuss at the beginning of the game as you're setting your miniatures up, like, how are we going to win? Oh, I have to take that castle, do I? Okay, that's interesting. So that, like, at the table, that is very present, I think. And I guess probably the two of you are missing like an entire chunk of this conversation, simply because we do not play in a we never really play in that mechanism where it's just like, we will gather together our soldiers and we will just enjoy the process of like watching the game sort of almost play itself out whilst we look on amused. Like, I guess there's a set of mostly historical wargaming systems where some of that agency is taken away from the players in the interest of like emergent sort of large scale Napoleonic kind of breakdown of communication kind of narratives emerging. And I suppose that probably the victory imperative in a, if we were to play a game like that, we would necessarily need to dial down our victory imperative and say the primary goal here is to what do they say in role-playing game design? Play to find out what happens.
Mm.
And playing to find out what happens as a sort of collaborative act of discovery is, I suppose, the, if not the antidote, it's like the alternative path to the victory imperative, which is, rather than us playing a game of chess and one of us coming out victor, the idea that we both came out victor because like something delightful and emerged from the system on the tabletop, and we didn't know to expect it, but there it was, and it was very funny, and we can talk about it over a loaf of bread warm ale after the game's finished.
Do you think that you can have that kind of victory condition, non-victory condition led sort of discovery narrative game outside of something like historical or narrative gaming? Because I agree that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it isn't just narrative gaming.
But what I mean by that is sort of, if you've got a game that's got a set out story, a sort of some form of preset narrative, I guess what I'm trying to get to is there a way of doing it in a purely emergent sandbox fashion?
So this isn't exactly it, but like, I'll reflect on a conversation I got from one player recently on Gasland's Legacy. They've been playing it and they were enjoying Gasland's Legacy, available in Blaster Volume 3. But they got to the end of the first couple of scenarios, and without spoiling too much, they sort of said, it's a bit weird because we're running away from this demolishing factory. Like, why are we shooting each other? Like, how does that fit into the running away? And I was like, I don't know. Why are you shooting each other? Like, have you checked the victory conditions? The victory conditions don't say anything about shooting each other. Why are you being such horrible people to each other? And he sat there and he sort of went, huh. Because he didn't get rewarded for killing them. Not with victory points, not with advancements in the campaign, like nothing. And so, like, going back to your question, like, Gasland's Legacy is somewhat an attempt to say, I wonder if you just set a range of games out in front and you sort of say, the imperative is escape the thing. Will people act in an escape the way thing, or will they just go, it's just another game of Gasland? I think I got my answer, but
well, I think sadly, tabletop miniatures gamers, I think, do fall back to certain tropes, and I do it just as
explosions
much.
Are fun.
Well, you're there, and it's like I've got the option to
your
shoot.
Face is there. I have this gun. Like what?
Well, people fall back to sort of crabs in a bucket thing, where it's like, okay, I'm not specifically sort of trying to kill you, but as I'm climbing up, I'm going to pull you backwards. I'm going to grab, if I've got a choice between grabbing the rock or grabbing your leg to pull myself up, I'll go for your leg, because that might be a sort of double bonus. I'll pull myself up and drag you down as I go. I suppose, again, sort of in relation to, useful advice for designing miniatures games. So we'll say again, I think I know, in my opinion, that we've had games within certain systems where I've taken that approach of, okay, how do I win this game as quickly and efficiently as possible? I assume that will be where the fun is, and designed, a team for doing that, gone in, won the game, and then sat there as you and other of our friends have just been yucking your faces off, laughing uproariously, leaping over walls and stabbing each other through eye sockets. Go, ha, come on! But you're all just pulling yourself down into the
What are you doing? You're literally losing, and you're still doing these things that are enjoyable.
You've already lost. Every extra second you're spending on the tabletop with your models, you're just throwing away wounds, and you're going to take long-term injuries. What are you thinking? It's over. You should just walk off. This fun you're having is just. This
is not the fun you're supposed to be having.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and this is where this really sort of sometimes grinds my gears in set design.
And I think because I was going to bring it up before you brought that specific kind of topic up, but I think it's the same. It's related, which is like one of the ways that a game like Frostgrave, for example, tackles this problem is that it doesn't actually pit the players directly at each other. It says, like, there's some treasure, go get the treasure. But to your point, like, winning is on that level, like it's a campaign framework. It's a like, like it's a Blood Bowl sort of like, I want to get the best team, that's what winning is, versus versus the individual games. And I can't remember if we talked about it before, but like that ends up being one of the reasons why I'm not that satisfied with that legacy board game, Super Smash. What's it called? The dungeon crawling legacy game that we played for a while.
Oh, Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven, yeah, because I feel like Gloomhaven focuses very much on like the sort of the impulse is to make your dude better, but the actual act of like the individual games isn't maybe as satisfying as the overall advancement thing. And I suppose that is very, very easy to get wrong in a miniature wargame design, which is to focus on the meta game or the campaign game at the expense of the actual individual games, and making sure that you've played enough individual games to know that the 15th individual game is as exciting and fresh and new as the first one was. And that just saying, oh yeah, but you're going to get 10 more experience and therefore unlock a new pair of magical boots, like that's for me at least, that's not sufficient to justify a less good 15th game than the first game.
Yeah, I think certainly in a sort of an ongoing, I think in a campaign system, but I think it's true for any game, is, identify what it is that your players are going to spend the vast majority of their time doing, and make that thing the most fun thing. Don't go like, okay, well, what's the most fun thing? Well, it's when you open this box. Well, how long did the players spend opening that box? 3 seconds if they're really fudge fingered. And what do they spend the previous 2.5 hours doing? It's an all right experience, the previous 2.5 hours, but when they open that box, the little dopamine rush they're going to get, they'll love it, and that will make them hang in for the remaining 15 hours. Look at what your players are physically doing, and if that's not the most fun thing of the game, then I think you've kind of fouled up. And I think,
because it's weird, because like there are some campaign games that actually I would prefer not to play as campaign games, because there's so much satisfaction in that like basic play. Like I actually don't like shock horror. I don't like Blood Bowl as a campaign game as much as I like it as a one-off. Like Necromunda's like cover shooting mechanic is just great when you've got these two balanced gangs, and I'm not certain it gets better as the gangs unbalanced. Like there's no reason necessarily that the campaign has to make things more interesting, or like that provides a different imperative, which is about multiple games, whereas the one that we're talking about is like, why am I enjoying making the correct decisions versus. But I guess like just to loop it back, then it's like you end up with two sets of correct decisions, one which is how do I win this game, and then one is how do I exit with the biggest bump in my meta game, the best campaign results. And those are fun things to balance for sure. Like you can design a game where both of those are in tension.
Yeah, and I think again, sort of, looping back to Gaslands, because obviously, it's something that we spent a fair amount of time thinking about in relation to the sponsors and the vote mechanics. The intent there was always sort of, okay, votes, lead you towards winning. What is a thing that is fun to do that can get you a vote? What's a thing that looks cool and is fun, and we can get you to do that, and you'll want to do it repeatedly? Okay, well, that's going to be a thing that will get you a vote. And so that's one way of tying in fun. Just
to put some jargon on that, like, are you familiar with that reward system jargon? I got it from role-playing game design, but the idea that so winning the game is the ultimate reward cycle. Like you start playing the game, you play the game, you win the game, great. And if there's a campaign, it's an even larger reward cycle. But inside Gaslands, you've got that, like, in order to like get ahead in that engine, I can spend votes to get me round it. And so there's a little sub wheel which is like, oh, I got a vote, oh, I got a vote, oh, I got a vote. And those sub reward cycles, like, they contribute to the overall reward cycle. But the point with like framing them as reward cycles is that the kind of impulse to engage with it, the act of engaging with it, and the thing that you get out of it all need to be enjoyable, because if going around a little reward cycle is a tedious drain on your energy, then you're not going to do the bigger one, and the game isn't going to succeed. You're not going to engage with the core cogs.
Yeah, I mean, as a set of practical examples, and again, assuming people watching this are quite familiar with Gaslands. In Gaslands, you've got the choosing of a template, which is advantageous if it fits into the right slot that you wanted to, and it's also quite fun because it's a visual spatial puzzle, and you get to look at things, and when you slot it into place, it just fits in exactly perfectly. It's very satisfying. And then you roll skid dice to try and shift up, because shifting up is the next thing that is a step towards victory. And then you've got a little push your luck game, which is quite satisfying, and the dice give tension and interest. And then the overall shape of a given sort of maneuver is, I'm looking to damage my opponent's pick up votes, which is a slightly big. So you've got a couple of small reward loops that are actually fun and move you towards victory, and they're part of a slightly larger reward loop where you're picking up votes, which is fun and moves you towards victory, and that's all part of an overall loop, which is racing, which is tense and exciting and fun.
Well, and actually votes are, if we're talking about these kind of mid-level reward cycles, like votes are one of definitely two mid-level reward cycles. The other one being, can you get an activation in all of the gears that you could get an activation in? So like part of choosing the right template and rolling the skid dice is like completing I got 5 activations on a car with a max gear of 5, like that's satisfying, and I pulled it off. And you sometimes don't get all the way around that reward loop, but that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, and they all I think completely make sense with the overall victory condition goal of winning the race. And so the things that you are driven to do by the victory conditions are the things that have been designed to be fun within the game and give you those rewards. And I think if there's a single thing to sort of to say as a sort of piece of advice, a lesson here is to look at your victory conditions and then look at what your game does that's fun, and make sure that the two are connected to each other, because that's a non-trivial, I think, sort of thing to suggest, because the number of games that I've seen, number of games I've played, where the assumption is that you're going to have fun playing their game, and then they do nothing to lead you down the road of enjoyment. They just go, well, have fun. I'll tell you what, I'll even write a rule sometimes in the front of the book which says, have fun. That's the most important thing. All the other rules are secondary. This, enjoy yourself. You go, okay, I'll look at your fun engine to see how it's going to help me engage in. Oh, it's doing nothing to help me here whatsoever. It's like, why am I going to have fun? Well, you can be sat around the table with your chums, moving toys around. What sort of weirdo isn't having fun with that? It's like, well, I like my friends, I like engaging with them, but your job is to like add something funner within that environment. It's not to just go put some things out, enjoy your friends, I'll try not to get in the way overly much, and sometimes those games are, if anything, fun drains from I would rather just push the game out the way at a certain point and just have a chat with my mate, rather than all right, okay, let's go back to, what was it, page 57. All right, now how do we re-engage with this? It's completely unintuitive. So yes, there we go. That would be, if there is a piece of advice here. Is there anything you want to sort of muse on this particular subject that I brought up?
I guess just to return to my first comment, like I think that my arc of design is like grab onto a whisper of an idea, a feeling that I want to evoke, and then I work as hard as I can to evoke that feeling mechanistically, and then I turn my hands to, and how do I make sure that that is a extremely satisfying one game loop of engaging with all of those things. And then I end up making a lot of changes to the core system as a result of trying to make the first victory conditions work. And I'm okay with the idea that like you focus on aesthetics up to a certain point, and then like the victory imperative then is allowed to take over and question everything, because at that point I'm really, really tangibly aware of like what the game tastes like when you play it, and it's working. And then to a degree, the victory conditions are in service of that aesthetic taste, not the thing that drives it. So if winning means you do something out of character with the flavor that I'm trying to evoke, the victory conditions are wrong, and we change them.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's, I've heard it mentioned before that some games design is sometimes either like painting or sculpture is one of the ways it's been described. Painting is where you add more and more to the game's design until you find out what it is.
Right.
Sculpture is where you've got a thing and then you chip away little bits of it until you find out what it is. I think possibly there's a point where, sometimes when I'm designing a game, I sort of think, okay, well, I know the block of marble because I know this is how you're going to win. This is going to be the overall thing, and I know the rough route. Now it's time to sort of refine that route from you're sat at a table, you've won the game, until it's a nice, smooth, fun thing. The other version is where you go, okay, I've got a fun thing, I've got a thing that's enjoyable, a little mechanic, and then I'll put that into another mechanic and I'll attach another thing to it and attach another thing to it, and then I'll find out, okay, it turns out you're doing this. I'll say that whoever does this best gets a little hat at the end of the game, and that's possibly two ways of building towards doing that. I think if you ever
I don't love that metaphor, because for me it's about elaboration and construction. Like I stick loads of clay together and then I find a sculpture in the side of it. Like for me, it's definitely a sort of more of an hourglass thing where it's like throw loads of things on, learn what's working, and then start hacking away again.
So yeah, it's a for a little conclusion idea, design challenge thing. Do you think you could have a tabletop game which is a 100% emergent, for the victory conditions and every other part? It literally does not tell you how to win if you win. It just gives you a set of rules for moving your models around the table and things you're allowed to do. Because obviously sandboxes, in computer games, there are a lot of computer games that just give you a set of tools and don't necessarily give you victory conditions, and then just let you have at it, and they work very well and they're extremely popular. And it feels like if there's a tabletop game, more so than board games, although there are some board games that are doing this a bit, that should be able to do this, it kind of should be tabletop miniatures games, because they are inherently quite sandboxy, they are inherently quite emergent. Do you think it would be possible to have, a tabletop miniatures war game with no victory conditions whatsoever? Just, this is fun, do this, here are ways of discovering, see what you can discover, see what will happen. You'll go, oh, that was fun, that was cool.
It's interesting. I suppose like there's a few things that occur to me. One is like computer games can get away with a lot more because they can provide very rich rewards for just interacting with it. They can provide incredible visuals, sound, like just aesthetic experiences, which you have to provide for yourself. And if you spend a bunch of time making terrain and painting the miniatures, like there's no surprise there, you know what they are. I mean, and then like an obvious approach to it might be like, tables filled with narrative or branching story paths. And in some regards, like I'm not sure that tabletop miniatures is the best way to experience that. That feels like it's not really speaking to the core kind of advantages of miniature wargaming. And I don't know, I guess like, yeah, how would you?
I mean, I do have a bit of an opinion, because you say it's like the advantage that video games have is they have amazing graphics and whatnot, and this is in no way to denigrate it, but Minecraft does not have amazing visuals. It doesn't have amazing graphics, as I've settled on that fact. What it has is it has automation. And that I think automation is one of the big things you struggle with, because the thing that's so great about that is you set the whole thing up and then you sort of poke a domino, and then then you go, I knew, it's brilliant, I built that, and that would do that, and that would do that, and that would do that, now look what it's doing, and that's immensely satisfying. And the thing is, and I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think it's a kind of why we're all so obsessed with dice in tabletop games, is because dice are a little bit of sort of automated resolution on the tabletop. You can roll the
Maybe. I mean,
dice.
like every
Don't
time
know
I've
whether
tried
it's
to
that
make
way.
one of those automated resolution systems in terms of like domino runs, like it's always been terrible. It's always been like, because the thing about an automation system with a computer is that it automates it. Like it is not like a tedious process that I have to go through. And so a miniature war game without a victory condition, like what is the purpose of me pushing the first domino if
Mm,
the result of pushing the first domino is I have to mechanistically resolve the second domino? And if I have to make a decision, I've no particular reason to make a decision left or right because the game hasn't asked me. So I just randomly choose left or right, and the next domino
yeah.
falls down, and I have to mechanize the resolution of that domino. And I guess I don't understand. And this is actually one of the core challenges with writing solo miniature games. Um, and one of the reasons that I found writing solo Gaslands so phenomenally difficult, because even though handling the system of Gaslands I find to be extremely pleasurable, like placing the templates, moving the cars, rolling the skid dice, like I like all of that.
Mm,
Without a justification for choosing left or right, I don't understand why to pick up a template.
mm, yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly hard to achieve that discovery, that whatever it is that you can have in other games, even just boxed board games can do it with sort of boxed away little cardboard boxes, and you can unfold them as you go along. Right, I think we have covered that topic quite successfully there. Yeah, look at your games, look at your victory conditions, consider how they actually lock in with the overall game. Make sure that playing the game for the victory conditions is actually fun. Don't assume that to be the case. And if you've got a brilliant idea for a victory conditionless
Yeah,
tabletop,
if you have a successful walking simulator miniature game, I would really
please let
really
us
be
know. I'd
interested
be
to see it.
genuinely fascinated to see such a thing. But for now, as usual, if you've listened to us this far, please like and subscribe. I assume you enjoyed what we had to say. If you didn't enjoy what we had to say, if you think we're wrong and foolish and other such things, please let us know in the comments section. Just generally, yeah, open up. What do you think about victory conditions guiding a game? Do you think that they ruin a game? Do you think you can get by without them? Let us know. Other than that, open up and reach out to us on social media. For now, we're going to say goodbye. Thanks. Bye bye. Bye bye.